Okay. What's next on your agenda, James?
So, since we got back to role-playing, doing our weekly game, we have been engaging with the best campaign setting that D&D has ever made and ever will make. So we thought it would be nice to talk about Planescape! If you don't know what Planescape is the setting where you get to go and explore all of the planes, which you might have guessed from the name.
You don't say.
Funny that. So you get to go between all the different worlds, all the different heavens and hells, and the realms of the elements, and everything travelling through portals. And it is really surreal and unique and creative. Just the most original and imaginative, best illustrated world that ever got made for Dungeons & Dragons. Going to start off with a little bit of background to it. When D&D launched, there was a lot of talk about here are angels, here are demons, here are devils. They come from somewhere. But we're not really going to talk about that much. After quite a while of Gary Gygax and his team saying, there are these elemental planes, but we'll talk about them later, finally the time came. Management wanted another big hardback book because the hardback books were really good at revenue and they were not doing so well for money at the time. And so they assigned one of their team write the Book of the Planes. And so this was called the Manual of the Planes, and it basically took everything that had been written so far about all the different otherworldly places and smushed it together into one ultimate reference guide and invented huge amounts of it wholesale.
Can I just ask, was this while it was still TSR?
Yes,
Okay.
This is all TSR stuff.
Okay.
So this is back in first edition that the Manual of the Planes got released. And it was a really influential product. Everything that's been written about the planes since then has been drawing upon the original Manual of Planes.
True, yeah.
But when second edition rolled around, they decided they didn't want to reprint it.
Huh.
And the reason why was because it was full of demons and devils.
Oh, funny that.
So originally the idea for the planes was that it was meant to be the place you went when you were really high level. When you were too awesome to run around on Earth, you could go to hell and punch out some devils. But in the wake of the Satanic Panic and all of that, TSR decided they didn't actually want to publish books featuring demons and devils. And so when the time came to reprint it, it just sort of didn't happen.
It's funny, a lot of people looking back are like, that didn't happen. No, like, I actually know a guy whose mum burnt his books.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, he's about 10 years older than us. And yeah, his mum burnt his D&D books.
See, the stories I've heard have been more about parents who had a look at the books and were like, okay, I've heard this thing is satanic. Let's look at it. And they had a look at it and said, this is about as satanic as a calculus textbook. Here you go.
Yeah, no. There were definitely some. So the stories do come from true places.
Yes. Well, true-ish places.
True-ish, yeah. Yeah, no, obviously not everyone, yeah, but...
Oh, I mean the origin of the whole fear-mongering.
Oh, yeah, no,
blown out of proportion.
Yeah.
The Manual of the Planes didn't get a reprint. And then, years later, second edition rolled around. This is when the reprint didn't happen. Demons and devils and everything got their names changed to avoid any of the bad news. And so this is where you get the Tanari and the Bartezu, which apparently meant to be Baaaaack, according to one of the books, which I think sounds terrible. Anyway, yes, they renamed everything to avoid having any sort of offensive anti-Christian content. But second edition was the time of the campaign settings.
Right.
We've covered a lot of them so far.
Oh, yeah.
And the thing is that all the new campaign settings made money. They were all really well received. You put out a new one, people would buy into it. Later on, it was one of the things that led to the downfall of TSR because they were competing so hard with themselves.
Right.
And they were splintering their own franchise so much by having all these different competing lines. But early on, it seemed like things were going pretty well. And so what would happen was that they'd roll out a new campaign setting, they'd support it really well, and then when sales dropped off, they'd just let it die and launch a new one in time. And so in about 1993, Spelljammer was starting to die off. Spelljammer was a sort of sci-fi D&D world, which fingers crossed, is going to get a reprint really soon.
Hey.
Please, 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 please. You get to fly on actual wooden ships in outer space from D&D world to D&D world. It's pretty stupid in the raddest, most awesome way.
Sweet.
There are giant space hamsters. And I think there are plutonium dragons.
Rad.
Anyway, Spelljammer was starting to die down. And so management had a meeting where they said, okay, everybody, we want suggestions for what we can do next. We want something that's got that same sense of exploration, of travel, something that's accessible to low-level characters, not just the high-level characters. And at the same time, people had been floating around the idea of reprinting the Manual of the Planes for 2nd edition.
Right.
The two ideas smushed together. Why don't we do the Planes? But instead of it being a place that you can only get to when you're level 20, why don't we make it so that people can go and explore heaven and hell and the worlds of fire and water and thought and imagination immediately? Level 1. Do it straight away. And so that was the idea behind Planescape.
Nice.
So very quickly on, it became apparent that they were going to need some sort of mechanism to travel around. In Spelljammer, everybody got a ship with a magic item on it that let it travel between worlds. Magic item being called a Spelljammer.
Oh, right.
Yeah. And so they floated that briefly, but they decided it was much better if you had a central location. A location from which you could get to anywhere. And with that, that's really how Planescape came to be.
Was that location Outlands or Sigil?
Sigil.
Okay.
Sigil had not existed on the list.
Had the Outlands existed?
So before this point, you had the basic structure of the planes, but a lot of them had different names, and they got their names changed in Planescape to avoid religious references.
You know what? I'm gonna put a copy of the map up on the blog and up on the YouTube video of this, because people might want to refer to.
So Outlands originally was all of the outer planes. There are the inner planes. There's the prime material plane, which is where your D&D characters normally run around, and then there's the outer plane. The inner planes are the planes of the elements, and so that's where you get fire, water, earth, air, life, death, well, positive, negative, and all the sort of sub-combinations of them. The outer planes are the planes of belief. Anything that people believe is going to show up on the outer plane. So the outer planes are where all the gods live.
Yeah.
The outer planes are where everybody goes when they die. The outer planes, there are 16 of them, and they're arranged in a structure that's called the Great Wheel, because they're kind of arranged in a circle. And in the middle, originally it was called the Plane of Concordant Opposition, I believe. Basically, there was a neutral plane in the middle, and in the original notes, it was really boring, and nothing happened there of interest. The outer planes have always been more interesting than the inner planes, because the inner planes are like, here's plane of fire, it's made of fire, if you go there you'll roast.
Yeah.
Whereas the outer planes are where you can go and high-five Zeus.
Or more.
Yeah. Note to viewers, do not high-five Zeus. We will not be held culpable for any lightning-related accidents your PCs may incur as a result of trying to high-five Zeus.
Or worse.
Well, you know that's Zeus. Anyway, the outer planes are always where the attention has been.
Yeah.
And so you had one plane per alignment that was like the afterlife for that alignment. And also one plane that was in between each of the alignment planes. So you get north-northwest, sort of. Yeah.
You get that gradation of things. Yeah.
And then in the middle there was the plane of opposition, the neutral plane, which was just kind of boring. And in Planescape it changed to being called Outlands, which is a much better name than the old one. And it kind of became the place that people have colonized, for lack of a better word.
The suburbs.
Yeah, it's the place where people have now moved in. And so there are all these little towns, each of which has a portal to their respective alignment planes. And they're almost more strongly aligned with the alignment than the plane itself, because it's full of people who are trying really hard to be lawful evil or neutral good or chaotic neutral-ish. And in the middle of it, there's the Spire, this massive, impossible mountain, and floating on it is the city, just above it is the city of Sigil, which is the central location in all of Planescape, and probably the coolest place ever created for any D&D game. Though White Plume Mountain pretty good.
Yeah.
But no, Sigil is so great because it can contain absolutely anything. Sigil is a city in the inside of a torus shape. So sort of like a
donut.
Sort of like a donut. A hollowed out donut. And you are living on the inside of the donut. So depending on where you're standing, you can look up and you can see buildings above you.
And if you walk in one direction, you will end up
back where you
were. Yeah.
Sigil contains absolutely anything you can find anywhere in D&D because it is full of portals. Why is it? How is it? Nobody knows. But if you know the secrets of how to open the portals, you can get absolutely anywhere from Sigil. And so as a result, it is a place where you can go and see angels and demons drinking in the same bar together. Sigil is inhabited by everyone. The only native people are these strange floating creatures called the Daebus, which you haven't met yet because we haven't really focused on them. They're going to show up in the next adventure that you do.
Okay.
The Daebus do all the repairs and the maintenance, and they only talk in pictograms.
Whoa.
And they serve the Lady of Pain, who is the sort of the symbol of Planescape. She is completely unknown who or what she is. There are various theories, and I think one book hints that she's maybe Poseidon's daughter.
Okay.
Weird. And another one hints that she's some sort of, I guess in like modern D&D parlance, a primordial or like pre-primordial being. In any case, she seems to be in some way linked to Sigil. She can definitely control the portals and turn them on and off again. And she has only a few rules. The main ones are no gods allowed and don't worship me. And so she's more sort of a symbol. And in her place, the people who really have the sort of day-to-day power and actually make everything work are the factions. So this came out at a time when White Wolf was really big.
Oh, right.
And Vampire the Masquerade and all of that.
With its factions.
Yeah. One of the big selling points was that you got to pick which faction you wanted to be a part of. That was a really big part in 90s gaming. Just like Legend of the Five Rings too. Which faction are you going to be a part of? And so to make a sense of belonging and to have some cool powers that players could pick, and to really emphasize the idea in Planescape that belief is power. On the plains, there's infinite gold, there's infinite people with swords, but the real power is the power of belief, which can change reality. And so there are these 15 different factions, all of whom have different philosophical beliefs, hold a different position in the city, and are constantly in this sort of cold war with each other to get enough people believing their view on reality. Because none of them are correct. But they all believe that if they get enough people to believe what they're preaching, that they could retcon reality to make their philosophy not just be true, but always have been true.
Classic.
We're not going to talk about the factions today, though, because we're going to do some follow-up videos. When we were thinking about what we were going to put into this podcast, Planescape is by far the biggest D&D setting ever. I mean, yes, there's way more detail that's been put out about the Forgotten Realm, the different types of cheese that you can buy, the names of every single river and so on. But just in terms of sheer scope, every single D&D world can be visited from Planescape. Every single thing that you could ever play in any D&D campaign setting will have found its way to Sigil at one point or another. And every single person who has ever died from any of those campaign settings is somewhere out on the Outer Planes now. In some form or another. Or when they've died, their soul gets to merge with the plane that they believe in. And so, like, actually empower their alignment. This also makes Planescape the only D&D setting, I think, that actually really engages with alignment.
Which is interesting to me because the people who meme D&D a lot love the alignments, and yet Planescape just isn't being talked about much.
I think it's because it's kind of old. It's a little bit obscure now.
Well, we're bringing it back.
Yep. Hashtag Planescape 2022. Another thing in Sigil that's really iconic, but slightly more contentious, is the cant.
Oh, yeah. Some of the words in the cant I love, some of them, meh.
So to really sell it as an urban setting, Sigil itself was envisaged as being a sort of, like, punk-esque take on Victorian London.
To be honest, in my head, it's basically Ankh-Morpork. That's basically how I picture it when... And obviously, like, Ankh-Morpork is London plus New York plus ancient Rome plus...
I think Prague was the other one he said it was.
Or, yeah.
I think our sigil can't help but be New York, because all modern day, if you're talking about the city, it's New York.
Yeah, and if there's somewhere where you can get everything, it's New York.
Yeah. If you're talking the ultimate city, the city of cities, it's New York.
Yeah.
But anyway, one of the things that they used to really add some flavour was slang. And so the creators looked into Elizabethan and Victorian slang and then put some of that in to sort of have the language of the plains.
So your house or accommodation is your case. People are called cutters.
Yeah. A thief is a knight of the post. An idiot is a Burke.
Money is jink.
There's lots of other things too. The thing is, when they were writing the books, most of the time it's forced in with a really heavy hand. So people got sick of the cant real fast.
Yeah, sometimes.
It's one of those things, if you're going to use it, I think it's actually a good thing. I think it's cool to have the slang of sigil.
I like it most of the time.
Use it with a light touch.
Yeah, there was one time you said something to me like, I've got the dark on XYZ.
Dark is secret.
And I was like, what the hell are you going on about? Just speak English.
Yeah. Oh, one of my favourite background NPCs is, this is a character you haven't met yet.
Okay.
I don't know if you will meet them, but on the other hand, they're really awesome. There is a Modron who has come to live in Sigil. And they are sure that everything works logically. And so they're trying to study and analyse everything, put the rules together. And they've noticed that everybody uses this cant.
Oh boy.
But the Modron has no idea how it works. And so its thing is that it will use it all incorrectly and terribly.
Bless.
And it doesn't understand the difference between correlation and causation.
Oh.
So it gets very confused about things. It's a very cute character.
Yeah.
The characters were one of the things that made Planescape so cool. And that's another thing that we're going to leave for a later video.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I think really made Planescape sing, apart from the idea of belief is power, is that they made some rules for Planescape.
Right. Yeah.
And so these are sort of thematic ideas that repeat across the entire line. And I think they really help to sort of bring it together.
Totally.
And so the rules are the rule of threes. Everything will happen in threes.
Yeah.
There is the rule of circles, which says that everything is going to come full circle. And there is the rule that everyone is the centre of the universe, and everywhere is the centre.
Yeah. I love the grounding of these rules in other disciplines. So, threes and circles, there's a very narrative theory thing to that. And the centre of the universe one, I love that because it's both a physics thing and a theological, metaphysical thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the other thing that it really emphasises, this was coming at a time when Dungeons & Dragons was trying to move quite far away from dungeons. And so Planescape makes a really big point. You are not going to be doing a dungeon crawl in Planescape. There is no such thing as a dungeon crawl. You are going to be interacting with characters. You are going to be making interesting decisions, travelling, telling stories.
Which is why we like it so much, because we're not hugely into the dungeons side of things.
Yeah, we're much more into the dragons side of Dungeons & Dragons. Thus our campaign setting.
I've had a few good dungeons. I did love me some Plume Mountain.
White Plume Mountain was amazing.
And I did love me some Castle Ravenloft, so...
Yeah, those are kind of the best dungeons ever.
But I can do without at the same time. Oh, you know what? I liked the Tomb of Annihilation too.
Well, some of it.
The first four levels. And I liked Omu. Omu was cool.
Omu wasn't dungeon.
I suppose.
That sort of was.
A relationship with a place is like a dungeon, you know?
To me, it's a place that's sort of a flowchart as a dungeon.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, like, otherwise Chult itself could have been a dungeon.
Well, I mean, why not? Anyway,
we're straight off topic, as is our habit.
want. What's next?
Well, adventurers in Planescape, the idea was that you would be part of a faction, that you would typically start an adventure in Sigil, that would be your base of operations as part of a faction. You'd get cool powers from being part of your faction. The factions, interestingly, were not based on alignment. And so there was a big focus on this faction would be anybody who's not lawful can join this faction. And so you'll get people with very different alignment rubbing shoulders. Also, unlike other worlds like Forgotten Realms, where the important people are very high level, very powerful, in Planescape, a lot of the important, powerful people are not actually very powerful physically. And it's all about their sort of non-combat power, is what they know rather than what they can do.
Right.
Anyway, so the expectation was that you would start off in Sigil, you would go and then go from Sigil and have adventures out exploring all the different outer planes. And we will talk about the outer planes in a later video as well, because there's so many of them and it's so fascinating. There were a lot of products released for Planescape. However, unfortunately for Planescape, it came out at the time when TSR was dying.
Oh no.
Planescape came out in 1994, and within a couple of years, I don't remember what year it was that Wizards of the Coast bought them out. I know 3rd edition came out in, 2000? 2001?
Right, I don't remember.
I want to say it was about 1997
Okay.
that happened.
That sounds about
And so
right.
what happened was, for a couple of years, Wizards of the Coast kept the TSR team going, and they kept all the labeling and stuff, while they made their own plans for, we will officially launch the takeover with 3rd edition. So Planescape got pretty heavy support for a while, but after a couple of years, as everything was starting to wrap up and get ready for 3rd edition, Planescape was one of the settings that got the cutting block. So Planescape had a fairly developed meta plot, and we're not going to talk about that at all, because Claire is in the middle of experiencing it for herself.
One day we'll talk about it, I guess.
One day. Once we've finished the adventures of Derwin.
Yeah.
Anyway, Planescape had this fairly... One of the things I thought was interesting about the meta plot was that rather than having one storyline that went through the whole thing like Dark Sun, there were actually multiple different plot threads. But when... in the last thing, some pretty big changes happened to Planescape. And that was meant to be part 1 of a series that never eventuated.
Oh.
And so, basically, Planescape changed everything to the point where people felt like the setting had been broken by the meta plot.
Oh.
And then stopped.
Ah.
And subsequent Planescape books that were about planar things, that were meant to be part of the Planescape line, suddenly started appearing under the generic Dungeons & Dragons title instead.
I see.
And so it was this very strange abandonment of the line, practically.
Oh boy.
While management was gearing up to scrap the whole thing and go to 3rd edition. Of course, Planescape did make a couple of last hurrahs. It got to, just after it got cancelled, it got to come back in a computer game.
One of the most celebrated
computer role-playing games ever. You've played a bit of Planescape Torment, haven't you?
I have. I have to grapple with the old schoolness of the gameplay itself, but the writing and the premise is awesome.
So, in Planescape Torment, it got a remaster, I want to say a couple of years ago, except now I know it's not actually a couple of years ago, it's actually quite a while now.
Time is meaningless currently, so...
Anyway, it's really easy to go check out the remaster. It is a great game. You play as an amnesiac immortal who is trying to figure out who you are. Whatever it is that you've done to ensure your immortality is having the side effect of having damaged your memory. And so you are now locked in the cycle where if you don't manage to figure out what's going on, you will completely lose yourself. And so you gather a group of companions, all of whom are incredibly interesting and imaginative and well-written. The first one you get is a wisecracking, charming with the ladies Skull.
He's so awesome.
He is really funny. Mort the Skull is your first companion that you get. And all the other ones after that, there is all sorts of very interesting people that you get to talk to and interact with in your party. It is about there's probably other computer role-playing games now that have similar philosophical depth. But at the time, this one was really unique for this sheer amount of dialogue and conversation paths that you can go down, the depth of the world building, and the way in which it subverted a lot of the tropes. Deliberately subverted a lot of the tropes that you saw at the time. For example, the rats are the scariest monsters in the game. The rats are terrifying.
Yeah.
Don't mess with the rats. Anyway, yeah, Planescape Torment, well worth checking out. It's a little bit dated, graphics are a little bit clunky, doesn't matter, it's great. The other last hurrah that it had just before 2nd edition came to an end was there was a big mega adventure to wrap everything up with a bang called Die Vecna Die.
Oh yeah!
And the climax of that is set in Planescape.
I really want to play
where Vecna manages to break the rules of basically every single major D&D setting by escaping Ravenloft and then turning into a god and then managing to get into Sigil. Even though that's meant to be impossible. He does it anyway.
Tisk tisk.
If you're going to do your great climactic campaign, who better than Vecna to break all the rules, right?
Makes me feel bad for Azalin.
Poor Azalin.
Yeah.
Anyway, since then, Planescape has never returned. Unlike the other settings, like Dragonlance just keeps on coming back in one form or another. All the other ones have been resurrected for a new hurrah. Well, alright, maybe not Birthright, but one day, Birthright fans, one day you'll have your day. Because Planescape got folded into the core.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's become a core part of the D&D premise that when you go to the planes, there is a city called Sigil, and everybody meets there, and you can take portals from there to go anywhere. And so it all came back again in 3rd edition in the generic Manual of the Planes. That got to come back again, except now it was really clearly a Planescape-inspired book. In 4th edition, they completely ditched the cosmology, ditched all the outer planes, but Sigil still came back.
Ah, where did it fit?
Same deal. There's a city out in the plains, and you can get portals from there to go anywhere. So even if all the places are gone were now completely reimagined from the ground up, they're still there. And it's all in the Dungeon Master Guide for 5th edition.
Yeah, right.
So lots of people are holding out hope for a Planescape campaign setting, but I don't really know if you need one, honestly, because everything you need is actually there.
Yeah, and you can just get all the old stuff reprinted.
Yeah, and that's how we've managed to get into it. Planescape material, because it came out for such a limited amount of time and is so highly regarded, is really expensive.
Unless you go to Drive Through RPG.
Yep. They have all the old print-on-demand books, and it's great. There are some really, really good books on there. So we have been playing a Planescape game for how long now?
I want to say 2000, either 16 or 17.
Ooh, ouch. And that's not as impressive as it sounds, because we've had long hiatuses for having a child.
Yep. And before
being
that,
busy.
being busy. And,
yeah.
But now we have dedicated ourselves to doing it every Monday night.
Yep.
And I love it. I think we need to keep doing it.
Well, let's do an overview of what we've been doing so far.
Sure.
So we started off, it all happened because of Curse of Strahd. Curse of Strahd had a little Planescape Easter egg hidden in the Amber Temple section. And that gave me an idea for a meta plot that would tie Curse of Strahd together with Planescape and have this grand story arc that your character, Derwin, the Outback Druid, could go on.
Yeah.
And so we started off, we got out to the plains with the adventure from the campaign setting. That's just a really nice, simple little introductory adventure where you learn about what portals are and you go to Sigil for the first time. But we've been going through the Great Modron March adventure.
Yeah.
Where a whole legion of Modrons. Modrons are these little half mechanical, half fleshy, basically androids that are the embodiment of lawful neutrality.
They sound like the Borg.
Kind of, except they don't want to assimilate you.
And thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that. And so they, every couple of hundred years, they go on this big march, nobody knows why, all around all the plains. And this time, for some reason, they have gone early. And something is up with it.
Yeah.
And so that is part of the metaplot arc that ties into the Easter egg that got dropped in Curse of Strahd.
Mysterious.
So we've been doing that, and then in between the adventures for the Great Modron March, we've been doing some other adventures, some of which haven't been Planescape, some of which have been really slice of life ones. And recently we just wrapped up Something Wild, which was a big Planescape adventure as well from back in the day.
It was great. What book was it from?
What, Something Wild?
Yeah.
Something Wild.
Oh, okay. It was a whole
Yeah, it was a standalone adventure. That was why it
Yeah.
took us so long to get through it. That was one of the big ones. Planescape actually had quite a few adventures released for it.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, that one spanned, like, Sigil, Outer Planes, spoilers, Karkarai, and Beastlands. Like,
There's a lot of travelling around.
yeah.
It had gods in it. It was all about the nature of belief. The story got a little bit overly convoluted.
Oh, yeah.
There were so many different factions involved in that one.
But it was pretty epic.
It's a sort of epicness that you don't really get in other D&D adventures. It's about a god... Spoilers. A god is trying to change what people believe on another plane so that he can move from one plane to a different one.
He's doing a colonization.
Basically.
Yeah. Wow, that adventure was so much better and got me, like, with really big expectations for the following session, which was possibly the worst Planescape adventure we've done.
Yeah, we found the Great Modron March, despite its big premise, is very hit and miss.
Yeah.
In fact, it is hit and miss, and then hit, and then miss, and then hit, and then miss so far.
Yeah.
Every odd-numbered adventure has been fantastic, and every even-numbered adventure has been terrible.
Well, just to give a quick overview of what I've done so far with the Modron March, because that is quite like a taster of...
Yeah,
what
the real
happens,
thing is for the Modron March is just meant to be that it's an excuse to
travel the planes.
Travel the planes.
So the first one, I was off in the Outlands town right beside Automata. So Automata is where...
Mechanus.
Sorry, Mechanus. Automata is the name of the town. Mechanus is the plane where the Modrons come from. The plane of
Pure
lawful
neutrality. So it's just cogwork gears stretching infinitely. There's just rules.
But Automata, the town on the Outlands, is awful because it's a bunch of people trying to be that.
Trying to act like robots.
So it's like, oh, in order to do that, you have to fill out form blah, 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 but in order to fill out form blah, 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 you have to fill out form XYZ, and it was
but
just
you have
like...
to go to this office to be able to do it.
Basically, Duan got given the runaround there, and he ended up, like, just, like, summoning 400 ravens, and the police freaked out because they were like, Raven, I am putting you under arrest. No, Raven, and then I dropped concentration, and they were like, what?
Why did all the ravens disappear? And then, 500,000 Modrons appeared.
So,
it was very chaotic.
It was very chaotic, and I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
I'm proud that I brought a bit of
fun.
chaos to the town of lawful neutral. And then that was a good one because it really set the tone. And then the next one...
So the campaign is all centered around Modrons, and so you'd think that it would want you to be at least somewhat sympathetic or understanding of the Modrons, which is why the second adventure is the Modrons.
They stampede a town in heaven.
Knowingly stampeding a town in heaven.
Yeah,
They're in the way, and the Modrons are so lawful neutral that they will not. They don't care if something is in the way. They are going to go by their route.
Which is total BS, because in a later episode, they do divert from their path.
Yep.
So, yeah. This is one of the ones where, the even-numbered adventures are not great because they establish rules which they then go ahead and break.
I feel like it would have been fine to do this sort of like, oh, the Modrons are kind of awful. Later on,
yeah.
Once you'd already sort of gone, oh, the Modrons are interesting.
But see, then the third adventure was really cool in a very different way from the first one, where we had to go and rescue some Modrons who were being, like, experimented on.
Yeah, people were taking advantage of the Modron March to attack it, kidnap Modrons, and then do these nasty experiments on them.
Yeah. Then, the fourth one was
The
not
fourth
great.
one was... The adventure says it's meant to be like a exploration of the philosophical idea of the butterfly effect, where making one tiny change has this flow-on effect. Except I think they got so carried away with their cleverness at doing a butterfly effect adventure that they forgot to actually write an adventure.
Yeah, it's basically talk to this person tells you to talk to this person, that person tells you to talk to another person, and then at the end of it all you have to go back and talk to each and every one of them, and it was just not good,
not fun.
I did not have
interesting,
fun.
No choices to make.
Yeah. Whereas we're currently in the middle of the next one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which started off with a chaotic good town of
where we got
Sylvania,
to vandalise the Modrons!
Doing their Modron welcoming festival of painting and defacing all the Modrons as they march through. And that's a whole lot of fun. One of the other things I've really liked about Planescape is you're really big on co-constructivism. And because Sigil is meant to be this just wild place where literally anything could be there, we've had a lot of slice of life adventures where I'll get you to describe what your normal day is like or what your entertainment is like, or we even had one which we took from another book where you got to run a shop in Sigil, and that was really stressful.
And
really
I got
cool.
a new party member out of that, a sentient lobster who's a wizard.
So, how have you liked inventing things for Planescape?
It's been pretty fun. There are times where I go, oh no, he wants me to come up with something, but then it's like, wait, I know this. It's anything goes.
Yeah. I do find it a little bit intimidating myself, because I feel like every time you step outside there should be something amazing going on. It can't just be, oh, who's the person? It's an elf and a dwarf. It needs to be like, no, it's a genie and a sentient frog. You know, everything should be so big and colourful and interesting. So that's kind of intimidating to come out with all the time.
That's how I feel too. At the same time, it is great fun and a really good match tonally for Derwin, who's a bit of a silly grab bag character himself.
Yeah.